More than a that, more than a that.
Join the More Than a Dad family by following us on Instagram, subscribing to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to join our Facebook group for daily questions, motivation, dad jokes, and new dad tips. If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Be sure to like, comment, and share our content with other parents. Last but not least, make sure you check out our new merch. The link is in the bio of our Instagram as well as the description of this YouTube video. We are truly grateful and thanks for supporting More Than a Dad. Welcome to More Than a Dad podcast. I'm your host, Lou Mobley, and I have the coolest guy on earth with us today, Dre Moore. And I have a very interesting guest here with us today, someone from my childhood, my past. Seth, what's up, man?
I'm here. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you for coming.
We always ask, man, how's dad life?
Oh, dad life. It's all right. COVID's a bear, you know? Everything's all messed up. My kid, his birthday was in November, and he's still yelling, "Where's my party?" I was like, you can't have a party.
Not every day.
No. So, but it's good. It's good. I love being a dad. It's like my favorite thing.
No, I feel that. I think when I reached out to you, you were saying, I'm a hands-on dad. Like, what does that mean?
Well, I am really actively involved with my kids. So my life as a professional has always been as a freelancer, mostly doing theater as an actor and a writer, a director, voiceovers and stuff like that. And so my schedule has always really varied. And my wife is the one that has the normal job. She works at Penn. She's got a real job. She's got the health insurance. I'm the one who's always dropping the kids off. I'm the one who's always picking the kids up at school and whatever. I'm also the cook in my house because my wife, she boils a mean pot of water. So, and so I'm the one who's feeding the kids, and both my wife and I definitely co-parent. I mean, we share the responsibilities, and we have certain things that, she does the laundry. I don't touch the laundry. She cleans the bathrooms, which is nice, but I got to clean the cat box. But, we take turns. But we take turns putting the kids to bed. And, giving my son a bath. So I love parenting, and I'm really involved in it.
No, I think this episode is a great opportunity for us to learn from one another. So I want to just talk about, some of the things you worry about as a white dad, right? For your kids, and some of the things we worry about as black dads for our kids.
Well, I mean, I am hyper aware of the huge amount of privilege that I enjoy and that my kids enjoy as a result. I mean, growing up middle class, upper middle class in the suburbs of Philadelphia and Ardmore, my dad's a doctor, my mom's a physical therapist, never wanted for anything. We're never spoiled. We're never rich, but never wanted for anything. And, I met you because I was a big brother to your friend, Kadeem, right? And because he didn't have a dad. Right. But also just the stuff you see in the news, there's certain things as a dad I just don't have to worry about in the way that you guys probably do from everything I've heard talking to my black friends and just seeing what's on the news.
Right. Yeah, because, it's different. Growing up, in my mom, we wasn't allowed to, she didn't want us walking the street with, groups of more than 2-3 people at the most. Don't have your hood on. Mm-hmm. Even if it's cold. Mom, it's cold outside. Why I can't have my hoodie on? Get a hat or something. It just looks different. You can't. It's just a bunch of just rules and regular. It's just things you just taught ways to survive. But I'm just a kid trying to do regular kid things. So it's definitely a big difference.
And there's stuff that if our son, I don't know how old your son is. How old is your son?
My oldest is 12. He'll be 13.
Okay, so my boy's 9.
Okay.
Now, if my boy does something when he's 12 and your boy does something when he's 12, they're going to be seen differently for doing the exact same thing that boys just do, fooling around, messing around, doing stuff. And that's just not right, but it's also just true. It's just a reality of the world we live in. So, it's one of those things that my wife and I try to impress upon our kids how incredibly lucky they are,
right,
just by the very circumstances of their existence.
Right.
Like they didn't do anything.
Right.
They just happened to show up in our house, right?
And like I said, it's an opportunity to just get insight. You spoke a lot about growing up. Can you speak about like what type of dad you actually had? I know you said, upper middle class, you guys didn't want for anything, but maybe we can learn from like the type of dad he was and how he raised you.
My dad, so I was born in 1968, right? Because I'm old. And my dad was in Vietnam when I was born. And he was a doctor, and so he basically had a choice. He could either enlist as a doctor and go as a captain, or get drafted and go as a grunt, right?
Right.
So my father was in Vietnam when I was born, and so it was, he already had one son, but my father got home from Vietnam. He walked in the door, and my older brother looked at him and said, "Are you my dad?" So my father had this experience of having kids and then like not being able to really be there at first for them. And then when he got back, my father and the Army did not agree with each other, put it that way. And so my father had a lot of, and Vietnam, my father did not discuss Vietnam at all until 10 years ago, and he's in his 80s now.
Right.
Like he just put it away. Eventually he, started talking about it, and I had the great experience of actually interviewing him at one point about it, which was really cool. But in general, past that stuff, my dad has a temper, much less now, but when we were little, he had temper. Never hit us, but boy, we got yelled at. But I'm saying the bad stuff first. Why am I doing that? My father is an amazing guy, and was always there. We were not a big sports family, although my dad liked baseball, so we go see baseball games. But he was always there, doing stuff with us, hanging out with us. He worked a lot because he was a doctor, but he was home a lot too. We would, my family went to the theater. My family, went to the orchestra and all that kind of stuff. My father's a huge fan of opera, so I got to learn all about opera and music as a little kid. The thing my parents taught me, especially my dad, my mom too, was kindness, being a good person, caring for other people, standing up for the little guy, which is all stuff that I try to teach my kids now.
Right. So and that's is that how you develop the ability to be able to I guess empathize with the next person's situation to understand it? Because a lot of people you don't see it, so in a lot of people's mind it's it just doesn't exist. But you're very aware of what's going on. Right.
And it was like I said, it was a big part of my upbringing. I have very liberal parents who always were very liberal, and social action and being involved in the community and doing stuff. And even back before this whole sort of right now people talk a lot about sort of being aware of your privilege and all that kind of stuff. Even before that was a thing that people really talked about, my parents were aware of that. And so I was brought up to care about other people. Right? That it's not just about you. And I think it's learned. I really do. I think it's possible to break out of that. I know people who were brought up in very conservative households that were really selfish and didn't care about anybody else except them.
Right.
And they were able to get out from under that and realize, no, that's not a way I want to live. But
your parents seem obviously very educated. So I'm just curious to see we just had an episode recently about how we didn't learn credit and how to buy a house in a household.
Right.
From our parents. Was that something that you were privileged to learning at home?
No. No, I mean, it's something that should be taught. I mean, I had a bank account, I remember, and this is like back in the olden times, before internet, and like I had what's called a passbook. You actually had the book that you'd bring to the bank, and when you put money in, they'd write in the book how much money you put in, and then when you took money out, they'd write in the book how much money you took out. And eventually that changed it to these statement savings, where they'd actually just send you a piece of paper. And then they had the Mac machines, right? That was like the big thing. You could actually get money out of a machine. But I didn't like all that stuff. I didn't learn. But you know, when I think about the stuff I learned in school, like I learned how to use a sewing machine when I was in middle school. That's really useful. I learned how to cook, basically.
Like home ec,
right?
Yeah.
But probably the most amazing thing I learned that serves me more than anything else was typing, like how to actually touch type. I learned in middle school.
Was it a typewriter or was it a computer?
It was a typewriter. It was a typewriter.
Of course,
man.
it wasn't a computer.
Well, I worked on a computer, but like the memory thing was like an old cassette tape player. You guys know what a cassette is, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we not that young.
Yeah. But anyway, so
I had a Walkman.
yeah,
right. I know
Yeah.
what a cassette is.
yeah. So I mean, but I didn't get taught that stuff either. However, it existed in my life. Probably, I was aware that it existed. I didn't understand how to buy a house, but I knew that a mortgage was a thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I knew that credit was a thing. I didn't know anything about it. But I remember learning how to write a check, because you had to write a check back then. There was no like
Well, like
Cash App or cards or whatever. You'd have to write a check.
No auto pay.
No auto pay.
Can't put the bills on auto
Now
pay.
I just touch my watch to the thing and it pays.
so it wasn't no debit cards.
Eventually there were debit cards, but at first there was no debit cards. No. I know, right?
They used to write checks for groceries.
Yeah, you write checks for everything.
Oh my God! What did the check bounce and you then walked away with $300 of groceries?
It was a problem. And that's why now if you do write a check for stuff, they want your like blood type, and they want your like driver's license number, and then they want your firstborn child, because you know
Stuff like that.
just stuff like that.
That's crazy.
No, I want to talk to you a little bit about, like, you know, you said that your dad, you know, they took kindness.
Yeah.
He never put his hands on you, but like, just talk about how you were disciplined without being physically disciplined.
Okay, let me rephrase that. We did get spanked. That did happen. But it was always, and I don't spank my kids. And I think if they were to do it now, my dad wouldn't have spanked us. But it was in the, we were never hit sort of just out of hand. It was always in the context of discipline, and very specific. You did something, you're going to get spanked. I don't do that with my kids. I don't see how it's. I can understand why people would want to sometimes, but man, that's like, especially when my kids were younger, there were times when I'd be like, oh, I can understand why my dad wanted to smack my ass.
Right.
But so that did happen. Not that much, but we would have to really screw up for that to happen. But for the most part, it was. So the basic rule in my house, even as I got older, in high school, whatever, was don't mess up. Like, we were pretty much allowed to do whatever we wanted, as long as we didn't make a mistake, as long as we didn't get in trouble. And my older brother never got in trouble, and I never got in trouble. My younger brother got in a little bit of trouble. But the basic rule was, you know, be honest, tell us what's going on, don't drink and drive, you know, don't do stupid stuff, and you can have fun. So I did. You know, and the rule was when we got home at whatever time where our curfew is, or at a certain point there was no curfew, or I don't even remember. We had to come home, and if my parents were asleep, we had to wake them up. We had to wake them up and tell them we were home. And I remember one time, like, I got home and I might have done some things you're not supposed to do, kids, when you're in high school. And and I had to wake my mom up, and I'm like swaying back and forth, but I wasn't gonna fall over or nothing. Yeah, so I mean, but the basic rule was don't screw up, and but that was able to happen because we were taught to be responsible. We were taught to not take stupid, unnecessary risks. We were taught to be honest. We were taught to care. You know.
No, I like that. You know, I want to tap a little into, your freelance career, and obviously you were exposed to a lot more than like probably me and Dre, right? Like you talking about going to the orchestra and the theater, and so your interests are bigger. So I always tell my wife, one of the sayings we say is exposure equals expansion. Yep. And I think you're an example of that. So I want you to speak a little bit about how did you get into the freelance thing, and even further thinking, is that something you would encourage your kids to do?
Oh God, no. No. I mean, so I always wanted to be an actor. Like I always wanted to do it. I like to be in front of people, and so I was in the school play when I was in 5th grade, and just stuck with it from then on. I played a light bulb in 5th grade. First thing I ever did, played a light bulb. It's a very bright performance, and I felt that but really, no, it was awesome. And then So I knew I wanted to do that, and I went to college, and I studied a lot of stuff at college, including theater. And then I went into doing theater, and I was part of a theater company for a while in Central PA. And I don't know if you guys know Bloomsburg University up in central middle of PA.
No, Blooming. There's
a professional theater company in that town called the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble that I was a member of for 10 years. And then I was in New York for a while, and then I came to Philadelphia sort of by accident, continued to do theater, and eventually I got into doing what I truly loved the most, which was, I only recently stopped doing it. For about 20 years, my bread and butter was performing in schools for kids, doing assembly programming. So I had a solo show about Greek mythology, and then a solo show about world mythology that I wrote, that I performed for from kindergarten through 8th grade kids in the auditorium at school. And then I'd also do work in the classroom, teaching artist work. So working with kids doing theater and doing writing. And one of the things that was so rewarding about performing for these kids was a lot of them had never seen a live performance before. I'd perform my show and we'd do a question and answer afterwards, and a kid would raise his hand and say, "How long did it take you to make this movie?" Because they didn't get that it wasn't a movie. It was a live, like I was right in the room with them. It was totally new. And I remember when I was doing Greek mythology, one time after a show, a 6th grade girl wrote me the kids would write letters and send drawings and stuff. And she wrote, "I always thought Greek mythology was boring until today." And I was like, well, wow, look what I did. So that was what was so rewarding about it. Plus, it was fun. I mean, I was did a lot of theater in Philadelphia. I still do some voiceovers. The zoo just had that big exhibit with the big dinosaurs. Yeah. And there was a TV ad for that. That's my voice doing the voiceover for that.
That's a nice little flex right there.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I'll tell you, the best thing about it is right after I did it, I went to the Phillies game, and they played my commercial on the big screen at the Phillies game before the game started, like with my voice booming out of the speakers. It was fierce. I was like, "Hey man, that's me!" And people look at me like I was crazy, but my kids thought it was
definitely ain't believe it.
So anyway, it's the freelance life was great. The freelance life is hard though, because you don't know where your next check is coming from, and sometimes it's awesome, and you're rolling in it, and sometimes it's like I don't know what we're gonna do, and then. When COVID hit, all my work went away because schools closed, and the theater went away. I mean, everything went away. So that was really a challenge for the last couple of years. So,
what have you? So even before COVID, just talk about that part. Like, I think I don't want to discourage people from being artists or writers, but just talk about how do you manage a lifestyle and a family in a lifestyle like that? How you balance that?
So. I did lots of plays. I would do plays in theater in Philadelphia, rehearsing during the day and performing at night. And once I had kids, that kind of went away because the schedule just wasn't conducive. I mean, I could have kept doing it, but I wanted to be home for dinner. I wanted to be home for bedtime. I wanted to be home to give my baby a bath,
Right.
So I just stopped doing plays. And also, they didn't pay enough to make it worth doing. The nice thing about doing, I found a way to do the art that I love to do in a way that I love to do it because I was able to do it during school hours. So for me, I was basically doing it during the workday, and then I was home in the evenings to cook dinner and put the kids to bed and do all that stuff. It's a challenge. I have a lot of friends who are theater artists, and it's constantly juggling. And I mean, my daughter was with me at sometimes there's just nothing to do but bring her to rehearsal. So she would sit and, you know, I'd give her something to play with, or she would draw or whatever she would do while I was rehearsing the play. Lucky I didn't have to do that too often, but occasionally that's what you have to do. Like I said, I don't know that I would want my kids to do it unless they want. I mean, my kids do anything they want, honestly. Whatever they want to do, they can do. It's just hard because financially it also is challenging. Because I was doing what I loved to do, and that was always what I did my whole life, and I was very proud of being able to do that. But once I had kids, it became, kids cost money.
Right.
And they don't only cost money when you have money. They cost money all the time. So, like people ask if my wife is in theater. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not marrying a theater person. No way. She's got a real job.
Wouldn't be able to live.
No.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Health insurance right there. I mean, that's a huge thing. That kind of thing,
So you like a stay-at-home dad then?
For a long time, I really was. When my kids were little, I made a point. I only worked Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays as much as I could. So I'd be home Monday and Friday. And Monday we'd go to the Please Touch Museum because there was no bus trips allowed on Monday, so we had the museum to ourselves. And Friday we'd go to the zoo. The two best, we bought memberships at those two places because it was worth every cent to buy the membership to the Please Touch Museum and the membership to the zoo, because if the membership to the zoo, you got free parking, because that's the expensive part. And you could just go anytime and leave whenever you wanted. The kids get finicky, fine, we're out. I didn't just drop a whole lot of money to go to the zoo, so now I have to stay here and enjoy it. So every Friday we'd go to the zoo.
So that was like their education.
Well, yeah, And then eventually, because also daycare was expensive, so we wouldn't pay for daycare for a whole week. We'd only pay for daycare for like 3 days a week, because I could do the other two. And that's one of the ways we save money.
Yeah, I did that with my oldest son when he was when he was in daycare. His mom, I would keep him, and then the other days I would keep him for 2 days, and then the other day when I was off, and then the other days when I was working and his mom was working, I would pay for the daycare.
Right. And daycare.
Yeah,
it's a big number right there.
Yeah, that's true. And that's crazy. That's like a wow. No. That's crazy. But
I loved it. I can't.
No, it's not bad. It's just different. Like just how we was talking about like the differences about like how you grew up versus like how we might have grown up. Mm-hmm. Like that's just like something I've just in my mind. I just never even thought of like that. Like it's somebody out here that's just taking their kid to the zoo every Friday, and that's or the Please Touch Museum, because in a sense like that stuff is educational. Like the zoo is educational, the Please Touch, but it's just like you got a totally different way of doing something that like I've never even.
For me, it was also just self-preservation. Hanging out with a 3-year-old for a whole day, that's dull. Right? Yes, there's the good parts.
Nah, that's real.
I remember like when my kids were little, I would like curl up on the couch and put them like here so I could take a nap because I was exhausted from watching these kids all day. But I wouldn't change it for the world. And one of those things that we need in this country is paid family leave, not just so that moms can recover from being pregnant and giving birth and all that stuff, but so that dads can actually have time to be with their kids, especially when they're little, because it's such an amazing thing to watch that child learn how to use their hands, learn how to interact with the world. It's an amazing thing to watch. And it goes away so fast. Even now, I try to, as much as I can, as much as they'll let me, especially my daughter. My daughter's 12 going on 17, so she doesn't want to, but she, to the degree that she'll let me into the process, the experience of her growing up, it's, I want to know what happened at school. I want to know what happened with that kid. Apparently my son had a thing at school today. I just heard about it, that something happened with some girl, and I was like, what? What happened? I want to know, because I want to understand what he's going through in his life, how he's growing up.
I feel like I skipped something here, man.
What's that?
You had kids later in life. I feel like that's a dynamic.
That's true.
That my audience might appreciate hearing. How old were you when you had your first?
My daughter was born when I was 42.
Oh my God.
Now, I have a secret weapon, which is that my wife is 10 years younger than me. So she was 32, which made this all possible.
Right.
But I always wanted to have kids. It just never happened. Never met the right person. Never got in the right situation. It just never never worked out. And so by the time, and Meredith, she was not really down for having kids. I had to sort of convince her. I was like, come on.
You swindled her.
Sort of. Mostly what happened was, mostly wasn't, I don't think it was me. I think she saw her sister had kids and was like a good mom. She saw her best friend had kids and was a good mom. She's like, oh, I can do this.
And
I
she hadn't had no kids at the time.
What's that?
She had no kids at the time.
No, she had no kids at the time at all. She never wanted to have kids.
Oh,
but
man, you got
I think she
lucky.
was scared of it. But once she realized I can do this, and she's really good at it. She's a really good mom.
Right.
But I mean, I was 42. My daughter's now 12. She turns 12 on Friday. The next month I turn 54. I mean, I'm going to be like at the college graduation with a walker, or whatever. I try to stay in shape really actively for that reason. Like, for a long time, just doing the theater that I did, I had to keep myself in good physical condition just to be able to perform. Now I still try to do it because I want to, I still want to be able to sit on the floor and play with my kids.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was older too. He was still like, my dad was 51 when he had me.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's just impossible. He was a crazy person for that.
Yeah.
I got y'all both top.
Yeah, I know you got us beat.
Yeah, right. Your dad was much older, wasn't
My dad had me at 63.
Oh man.
Right. But like my dad, he always used to say stuff like he didn't think like, not that it put any pressure on me to have kids.
Right.
He always used to say like he didn't think he would be around to even see me have, let alone like see me graduate high school, let alone see me have kids.
Right.
And I mean like he happened to live long enough to see me have 2 kids. So
That's a gift. That's great.
right.
Like my dad was 26 years old when I was born. So I sometimes think about, if I was 26 when my kids were born, I'd be a grandfather by now. Because I think my grandparents were in their 50s when I was born.
Yeah,
like they were,
that's
they're the age that I am now.
Right, exactly.
When they're having grandkids. I because I love kids, I should be so lucky to see my kids have grandkids, have their own kids and be a grandfather. Oh, that would be amazing. And if that happens, I want to be like functional,
Right.
So I got work to do, but I do the work because it's important.
Yeah, my dad had grandkids has grandkids that's older than me.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yup.
Yeah.
Your dad kind of like started all the way over with you.
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I said he's a crazy person. Because me and my oldest brother, we're exactly 30 years apart.
Jesus.
Wow. Yeah, my father, my uncle is 20 years younger than my dad. We talk about how my uncle was an only child.
Yeah, like right, like that's how I was. Like my dad, my brother and my sister are about 2 years apart, and then my other sister is like 10 years apart from them, and then like I'm 20 years apart from my closest sibling.
I mean, and it's
on my dad's side.
Families are so different like that. It's like amazing. They all seem to, well, they don't all seem to work, but they all can work.
Right.
But I mean, there's no like rules.
It's not cookie cutter.
And that's the thing. Like, you get home with that baby from the hospital and you close the door behind you, and I don't know, 1 billion people have had 1 billion babies over time, but you're the only one who's ever done it, and it's terrifying.
It is.
That's true. That's definitely true.
No, so you basically say you never met the right woman. You wasn't like waiting to get into a certain financial status. 'Cause I feel like that was the hold up with me. I didn't have. I was scared, to have kids. Like that was like a thing, like in my 20s, and I was scared to have kids. And I always thought like I need to make this type of salary to even think about having kids.
Like I always wanted to have kids, but I never like was planning for it. It wasn't like a trajectory I was on. And I was just waiting for it. It just sort of never happened. I certainly met, plenty of lovely women in my life before I met my wife. And, I suppose if things had turned out differently, I could have ended up having kids with one of those people, but I didn't. It didn't happen. So who knows?
Foresight.
I sometimes think about you go back and you sort of look at the chain of events that leads you to the place that you are. And it is like, if I hadn't moved there, I hadn't done that, or I hadn't chose to do this, but that way madness lies, right? I mean, I did choose to do that, and here I am. So, but but this goes back to one of the earlier things we talked about, which is my parents, I always knew that if everything went totally south, they weren't going to let me starve. So I had this safety net that existed for me, which allowed me in the early years of being a freelancer and not making any money at all. My first job, I got paid $150 a week. And I survived on it. But if I had trouble, I could always ask. I never needed to, thankfully, ask my parents to bail me out. But it was always there.
That's the option.
And having that as a backstop was just made life easier, you know?
No, that's real.
So.
I wanted to talk a little bit about being a parent. I think you shared with me that your son was diagnosed with ADHD.
That's right, yeah.
And just share that experience and what that mean as a parent and how you went through that.
My son, we used to call him Destructor when he was little. He's always been a very active fellow. And a few years ago, I don't remember exactly, and I was thinking about it on the way here. You know, I don't remember exactly what led to it, but basically through a series of events, we ended up getting him tested. And so ADHD, right, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He's much more in the hyperactivity department than the attention deficit department. But basically, his little brain just doesn't regulate quite right. So you know, the part of his brain that regulates his behavior is not working at its full capacity. And so we found out that this, and we're like, well, what do you do, right? I mean, there's behavioral stuff you can do, and there's also medication. And we didn't know at first what we wanted to do, and we thought about it a lot. And we ended up going with the medication because we thought we would try it. We had a doctor who we really trusted, a pediatrician we really trusted, and it was revelatory. Leo became just, you know, he loved it. He loved that he finally could focus. He loved that he finally had the ability to sort of control what was going on. And it's not by any means, hasn't been like a magic bullet that sort of solved everything.
Right.
Because, you know, it's a challenge. Leo, he has a lot of trouble with transitions. He has a lot of trouble with new things. And at the end of the day, when his meds have worn off, he's a handful. Luckily, he still loves to snuggle and he still loves to play, and you know. But it's, as a parent, you want to be like, stop doing that, and like yell at the kid or whatever. It don't matter. You could yell till you're blue in the face. It's not going to change what that child does, because it's literally the chemistry of his brain isn't quite working the way it needs to work, and so that's just part of the experience, and that's one of the, that's been the hardest thing, is learning that I can't just fix it. I can't do anything. I can't stop him if I want to, because that's just not how it works.
Right.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge every single day. And then, you know, the teacher calls, oh, he was misbehaving in class, like, you know. Luckily, my kids go to a school where they're really attentive to the fact that kids learn in different ways, and, you know, some kids have behavioral issues and whatever, and so they're supportive of that, and it's sort of a partnership with his teachers to help with that. But it's
yeah, it's definitely my youngest son is like that. They actually diagnosed him with ADHD and what they consider ODD, which is obstructive disobedience disorder.
Yeah.
Because he just like says no a lot, or like if he not going to do something, like he's just not going to do it. If he stands and says I'm not doing it, he's not going to do it. And we actually, like, me and his mom, like, went through the process of medication, but it didn't work for us. Like, we had a few different medications. He was on Adderall, Ritalin, Quilivant.
No, and none of it worked.
None of it worked. None of it worked. We went through the process of meds, and he's then, like, now he does. They have like what they call theraplay. It's like therapeutic play for like behavior, and like to provide him like stimulation and stuff like that. And I mean, it helps. It's, like you said, it's hit or miss. It's trying. It's like you don't really know what you're gonna get at any given moment, depending on how he reacts to a certain situation. Especially
But
like
you
how
start to learn patterns.
Yeah, you
and learn certain things.
Yeah, like just like when you mentioned transitions. Like transitions is a big thing. Like if you want to move him from doing this to doing something else, and he doesn't want to do that, then it's gonna be a big tantrum. It's going to be hard to redirect him to get him on task to do. And
sometimes it's like, why is it hard? And I think a lot of it is because he's afraid, because he's unsure, because he doesn't know, or he doesn't like it. The transition from gym to music class. My boy loves gym. He's not as much a fan as music class, so he doesn't want to do that. Because when he's on something and he likes it, he's focused like a laser beam.
Right.
And that's part of ADHD too.
I think a question, just because I'm not experienced. Like sometimes, like just as parents, you say, "Oh, they're just being kids," or he's acting his age. Like when does that differ? And you notice that in your kid's behavior, like that ain't quite normal. Like where do you even have to compare that's not normal? Like where would parents find these things out at?
Other kids in the daycare, certain settings. That's just what they base it upon. They look at the kids around him.
Right. And I'm like, for the diagnosis, Leo, the woman who was doing this diagnosis talked to him a bunch, but mostly it was she gave questionnaires to his teachers, questionnaires to us, questionnaires to his pediatrician. So it's the observation. So it was the teachers noticing certain things that we were going to go, oh, okay, what does that mean? And sort of mess around with that to figure it out. Sort of figuring out how that works. But, I mean, in the end, kids will be kids. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things about parenting is letting your kids be kids. I mean, I read this thing once that said, just because your kid is doing something that's totally annoying doesn't mean you're allowed to tell them to stop. Because just because it's annoying to you doesn't mean they're not enjoying it. Doesn't mean it's not legit. Sometimes I tell them to stop anyway. But I try sometimes, even if it's annoying, just be like, you know what? Yeah, you're just going to do that. Can you just do it in the other room now? Because it's really annoying.
You got good understanding. Because I'd be like, pull my hair out. I mean, a lot of times, I've, over periods of time, I've just learned to just ignore it and just, especially like in the house. In the house, just go for you.
Yeah.
Go do.
Right.
When if we got to be somewhere where it requires a little bit more structure, then I'm going to need you to.
Absolutely. I'm not saying, no, and we're, I'm totally down with that. That's totally true. I mean, but I was walking with a friend once, and his son and my daughter were in front of us, and they were running, and I yelled out, "Be careful!" And my friend looked at me and he said, "You're a very different parent than I am," because he never said that. He just let his kid do stuff, and and the kid trips and falls. The kid learns to be careful. Right. I don't know. Part of me is like, can I just save the trip to the emergency room though?
Right. I'm that parent.
I don't need to go to the emergency room. I really don't. But so I try to do a little bit of both. Safety within limits, freedom within limits, right?
Yeah.
We get into the end of this.
Yeah.
We're gonna play our game called Documented Quality Time.
Okay.
Where you have to pick either or. Like, what are you more likely court to be doing? More likely to get caught doing.
Okay.
This or that, right?
This or that, okay.
So, Dre got some questions for you. I'm going to have some questions for you.
You ready?
I'm ready.
You want to start?
I'm going to start.
Go.
All right. So, you're more likely to let your kid face paint on you or playing at the kitchen set?
Face paint on me?
Yes.
Oh, playing at the kitchen set. Go. You cook everything. Because I'm a cook. That's fine. I don't want you painting on my face.
So you have a son and a daughter. So are you more likely to let your daughter paint on your nails or to be playing catch with your son?
See, they're both. It really depends on the situation. If I had to pick one or the other, I'm probably going to play catch. But my daughter has painted my toenails many a time. Because I'm like, I got to go to work. You can't paint my fingernails. Which is too bad, but it's just not going to work. But she's painted my toenails. But my son sometimes wants his toenails painted too, so we all do it. I'm like, whatever, man, whatever. It's nice.
So are you more likely to be playing Tea Party or are you playing with the action figures?
Action figures, because my daughter's not a Tea Party kind of kid either. She likes her action figures.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. I mean, she has a tea set, but she looks at it. She doesn't really do it. She's like, what do you do with it? Nothing. Or she'll play with the action figures drinking tea.
I got you.
Right?
You got it there?
Yeah. So are you more likely to be having your kids rehearse a script or making a TikTok?
Oh, rehearsing a script.
Making TikTok?
Yeah, my daughter's into just getting, like, she's not allowed to do TikTok. She can watch them, but she's not allowed to make them yet because she's little yet. She's 12. And
Heck, at 12? You got to let her make a TikTok at 12.
well, it's not true. She's allowed to make TikToks, but the only one who's allowed to see it is her
She
cousin.
can't post them. Okay,
Right,
yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And she likes to do the dances and whatever, but TikTok. Because I don't want to rehearse a script with them either, but if I had to choose.
No. Seth, we want to thank you for coming on
we
More Than a Dad
It is
podcast.
my honor and pleasure to be here. I've been listening to the podcast, and I think the work you guys are doing is just so good, and I thank you for it.
No, thank you. And we want to thank the
you.
listeners. The support has been unbelievable. Until the next time, we out.
All right.
More than a dad. More than a dad.